Proverbs 25 opens before us as an invitation to deep reflection on life, relationships, and human character. Its words, collected by the men of Hezekiah from the wisdom of Solomon, are not just ancient advice, but maps that point to paths of integrity, balance, and victory. Each verse in this chapter is like a hidden jewel, ready to be polished within our hearts if we are willing to search for its deeper meaning. Right from the start, we learn that God hides mysteries, not to deny them to us, but to provoke us to seek them. The Creator calls us to dig deep, to probe the invisible, to investigate what is hidden. This is the starting point of all wisdom, the understanding that not everything lies on the surface. Knowledge is a guarded treasure, and only those who persevere find it. That is where transformation begins. Proverbs 25 also shows us the greatness of those who know how to wait, listen, and govern themselves. Humility, for example, is presented as the secret to true honor. There is no value in forcing oneself into the highest places, but in being called to them at the right time. This inversion of logic shows us that life is not about self-promotion, but about character. Honor cannot be demanded. It is received. Another striking point is inner discipline. The text reminds us that without self-control, we are like a city without walls, vulnerable to any attack. True victory is not in controlling others, but in controlling ourselves. This is one of the greatest messages of this chapter. Wisdom is not measured by force, but by balance. Whoever governs their own spirit governs their life. The metaphors of this chapter also reveal the importance of words. A word spoken at the right time is like golden apples in settings of silver, while gossip can destroy even the strongest friendships. Words are seeds, and each one produces fruit of life or death. We learn that it is not about speaking much, but about speaking rightly, and when necessary, it is better to remain silent than to wound with the tongue. Another highlight is the call to generosity, even toward enemies. Feeding those who persecute us is like heaping burning coals on their heads. This attitude breaks the cycle of vengeance and reveals greatness of character. It is in this contrast between human logic and divine wisdom that the text becomes so powerful. It not only teaches, but also confronts our way of thinking. Thus, Proverbs 25 presents itself as a school of maturity. It shows us how to live with balance, how to build healthy relationships, how to face adversity, and how to cultivate a broken spirit before God. This is the invincible weapon of life, not external walls, but inner strength. This chapter invites us to dive deep, where each premise is a key to true wisdom. Before we continue, if you enjoy our videos and feel that they have blessed your life, like and comment. Even if it's just an amen, this makes a huge difference for this content to reach more people and impact lives. If you are not yet subscribed, take this opportunity to subscribe, turn on notifications, and share with your loved ones. This way, YouTube will get to know you better and recommend even more videos like this to help you on your faith journey. Help spread this message of faith and hope. Each like, comment, and share strengthens this work, which we do with all our heart to build up your life. Together, we can reach even more hearts. Continuing. The first truth that Proverbs 25 presents to us is almost a riddle in itself. It is the glory of God to conceal a matter. To search out a matter is the glory of kings. Here we have a direct contrast between two levels of authority, the divine and the human. God, in his infinite wisdom, chooses to hide certain secrets, not because he wishes to push us away, but in order to provoke our pursuit. It is as if the Creator places spiritual treasures in hidden places, not to deny them, but to train us in discipline, humility, and perseverance. When we understand that there are things that will not be revealed immediately, our hearts learn to value the process. Many people want ready-made answers, quick solutions, and instant revelations, but biblical wisdom teaches us that growth comes through seeking. Gold that lies on the surface has little value. True treasure is buried, demanding effort, patience, and digging. The same is true of divine mysteries. They are revealed only to those who are willing to seek them with sincerity. This principle challenges us to a change in mindset. Instead of complaining about what we do not understand, we are called to see what is hidden as an invitation to intimacy with God. Every divine silence is an opportunity to dig deeper. Every apparent absence is, in truth, a call to rise higher on the ladder of faith. What is concealed is not denial. It is training. The glory of God is to maintain mystery, and our glory is to desire to uncover it. At the same time, this premise points to the responsibility of leaders, here represented by kings. Their glory is not in being satisfied with the obvious, but in searching out what is hidden. In a world where many settle for superficial answers, the true leader is the one who digs deeper. The wise man does not accept the first impression. He investigates, compares, ponders, and only then decides. It is this process that makes him worthy of trust and honor. We can apply this to our practical lives. How many times do we face situations that seem inexplicable? How many questions remain unanswered? At that point, we must remember, there is glory in seeking, and there is glory in waiting. When we look at the scriptures, we see that great men like Daniel, Joseph, and Solomon stood out not because of haste, but because of their ability to interpret what was hidden. They understood that the secret was the path to wisdom. This proverb also teaches us about limits. There are things God chooses not to reveal, and we must accept this as part of His sovereignty. Spiritual maturity lies in recognizing that not everything is for now, and not everything is for us. Our mission is not to demand all the answers, but to trust in the author of history. When we accept this limit, we are freed from the anxiety of wanting to control everything and become more able to walk by faith. Finally, this premise opens a powerful loop for the rest of the chapter. If the glory of God is to conceal and the glory of kings is to search out, then every following proverb is like a hidden pearl. Each piece of wisdom is a layer revealed to those who have the courage to search. That is the great key. Wisdom is not handed out on a silver platter, but given to those who thirst for it. Whoever dares to seek will always find. Biblical wisdom shows us that the greatness of a king does not lie merely in displaying crowns or thrones, but in his ability to search into the deeper matters. A ruler who limits himself to appearances makes shallow decisions, and shallow decisions always produce shallow consequences. True power lies in discerning what eyes cannot see, in perceiving beyond the surface. Here, Proverbs teaches that ruling is not simply about commanding, but about understanding. Authority is not measured by decrees, but by depth of vision. A leader who knows how to search is not deceived by the masks people wear. He perceives hidden intentions, reads gestures, interprets silences. This skill of discernment is what makes him trustworthy, for he governs not only with laws, but with wisdom. And how often in our own lives are we called to that kind of leadership? Whether in the family, at work, or in the community, our greatness will also be measured by the ability to understand beyond the obvious. This truth connects directly to the human heart. The previous text already compared the heart to the heavens and the earth, unfathomable. Now the focus is on the role of the leader in striving to understand those mysteries. Those who do not investigate, who do not analyze, end up being governed by circumstances. And whoever allows himself to be governed by impulses loses mastery over his destiny. Greatness, therefore, is born from depth, not from haste in making decisions. In practice, searching requires patience and observation. How many relationships would be saved if there were more listening and less judgment? How many financial decisions would be different if there were more analysis and less impulse? The proverb calls us to cultivate this deeper look, not only for the sake of leadership over others, but for self-government. If we do not search our own intentions, we will be ruled by desires we do not even understand. A superficial king governs by appearance, but a wise king governs by essence. essence is only revealed when we investigate. It is like looking at a diamond. The rough stone looks common, but when cut it reveals unique brilliance. In the same way, the situations and people around us carry hidden wealth. We must have the courage to cut, to go beyond the first impression. That courage is what sets ordinary leaders apart from extraordinary ones. Here we also find a warning. Searching is not about distrusting everything, but about seeking to understand with balance. Wisdom teaches us to be prudent without falling into paranoia. Balanced discernment avoids both naivety and harshness. This shows that greatness is not just about investigating, but also about interpreting correctly. After all, seeing deeply without knowing how to apply it is like having a map without knowing how to use it. This premise opens the way for the rest of the chapter. If the king must search, the same principle applies to us. Life requires us to be investigators of what is hidden, of our emotions, of the challenges we face, of the paths we need to follow. Glory does not lie in living superficially, but in seeking understanding. Those who dive deep find answers that change destinies. Proverbs 25 compares the human heart to the vastness of the heavens and the depth of the earth. This metaphor is powerful, for it reminds us that within each person there exists a hidden universe. Just as we cannot measure the entirety of the skies, neither can we fully probe the intentions of the heart. This teaches us humility, recognizing our own limits. To judge someone solely by what we see is to ignore the vastness that remains invisible. This comparison reveals that the heart is a territory of mysteries. There are layers of intentions, feelings, and thoughts that even the person themselves may not fully comprehend. Many times, we act without understanding the source of certain impulses, for the depth of the soul goes beyond reason. This proves that self-knowledge is not a final destination, but a continuous journey. The human heart will always have new areas waiting to be explored. The wisdom here is twofold. First, about ourselves, and second, about others. Regarding ourselves, the call is to seek to understand our intentions under the light of God. It is not enough to trust our own evaluation, because the heart is deceitful above all things. Jeremiah 17:9. We need the divine lens to illuminate what remains hidden. Without that light, we will always be prisoners of inner illusions. Regarding others, the lesson is clear. Never underestimate or overestimate someone based solely on appearances. People who appear fragile may reveal themselves as strong. Others who seem noble may harbor dark intentions. The human heart is far too vast to be summed up in a label. That is why prudence means not rushing to judgments. Wisdom lies in observing fruit over time, not mere gestures in the moment. This proverb also points us to the need for spiritual discernment. The human heart may be inaccessible to man, but not to God. The Creator knows thoughts before they are spoken, intentions before they become actions. This means that while we try to decipher hearts, true security is in trusting the divine gaze. He sees what the heavens hide and what the earth covers. Applying this to daily life, we see the importance of constant vigilance. How many poor decisions come from trusting too much in what only seemed right? How many alliances were made without probing deeper? The call is to learn to look beyond, to ask for discernment, and not to be carried away by first impressions. It is better to take time searching than to suffer later from hasty choices. Finally, this premise connects with the previous ones. If God's glory is to conceal and the King's glory is to search, then the human heart is the greatest field of that search. Whoever desires wisdom must learn to probe hearts, starting with their own. Just as explorers study the skies and scientists research the earth, we are invited to seek truth within ourselves. Whoever masters the heart holds the key to life. The proverb presents us with a vivid image. Just as silver must be refined so that the silversmith can fashion a valuable vessel, so too must the throne be cleansed of the impurities of injustice. This metaphor is powerful because it shows that both metal and leadership only reach their true value after the refining process. Purity is not natural, it is achieved. To reach gold, the dross must first be removed. This principle reminds us that authority without character becomes a threat. A leader may have power, but if he does not submit to the refining process, his leadership will corrupt. The same applies to each of us. We all carry potential, but that potential is obscured by the impurities of ego, pride, and sin. God's process in our lives is precisely this: to remove layers of impurity so that our true value may shine. In practical life, refining happens through trials, crises, and corrections. Just as fire reveals the purity of metal, so adversity reveals who we really are. It is in the heat of challenges that we learn what must be removed: impatient attitudes, harsh words, wrong intentions. It is not a comfortable process, but it is necessary. No one becomes gold without passing through the fire of transformation. This metaphor also teaches us about upright leadership. When corruption is removed, the throne is established in justice. This means that the foundation of authority is not power or influence, but righteousness. A just leader is like refined gold, resilient, valuable, and trustworthy. On the other hand, a corrupt leader is like impure metal, fragile, stained, and despised. The endurance of the throne depends on the purity of the heart behind it. Applying this to our daily lives, we must ask ourselves, what impurities still remain in me that must be removed? It may be pride, envy, or fear. We all carry dross that hinders our shine. Recognizing this is not weakness but courage. Only those who accept being refined experience true greatness. Gold does not fear fire because it knows it will shine even brighter afterward. The proverb also shows that the process is not just individual. When impurities are removed, the entire community is blessed. Just leadership brings justice to all. A purified heart inspires others to seek the same. The refining of one can generate transformation in many. That is the beauty of the process. It is never only about us, but also about the impact we will have on the world. Finally, this premise opens the way for the next wisdom. If gold only shines when impurities are removed, then honor only comes when humility is practiced. This connection shows us that purity and humility walk hand in hand. There is no arrogant gold. True value is found in serving, and this will be the next step in our journey through Proverbs 25. The proverb teaches, "Do not exalt yourself in the king's presence, and do not claim a place among great men. It is better for him to say to you, 'Come up here,' than for him to humiliate you before his nobles." This image is striking because it challenges the human instinct to seek recognition. We live in a world that values self-promotion, but biblical wisdom reveals that true honor does not come from demanding it, but from waiting for it to be given. Humility then becomes the hidden key to greatness. Those who force themselves into the spotlight end up exposed in their pride. But those who quietly remain faithful in the hidden place are exalted in the right time. It is the principle of the seed. First comes the burial, then the growth, and finally the fruit. Those who resist obscurity rarely enjoy lasting honor, for only humility produces solid recognition. In practical life, this truth prevents us from the trap of competition. Many exhaust themselves fighting for places that are not theirs, while wisdom teaches us to wait. What is truly ours will come at the right time. Honor is not stolen, it is granted. That is why humility frees us from the anxiety of needing to prove ourselves to others. The humble one does not need to fight for status. He trusts in the divine timing that lifts the faithful. This premise also reveals a profound spiritual truth. God himself exalts the humble. Throughout Scripture, we see the same principle repeated. He resists the proud, but gives grace to the humble. This means that humility is not only a social virtue, but a divine requirement. Whoever lowers themselves before God is raised up by his own hand. This is honor that no man can take away. We can see this in biblical examples. Joseph was imprisoned before he was honored in Pharaoh's palace. David was a shepherd boy before he became king of Israel. Even Christ humbled himself to the point of the cross before being exalted above every name. The path of true greatness always passes through humility. There is no shortcut, for humility is the foundation on which honor is built. This principle also preserves us from the shame of arrogance. Those who take for themselves positions that are not theirs end up exposed and humiliated. It's better to be called to rise than to be forced to descend. Humility is the wisdom of those who know their place and do not rush ahead of time. To wait is not to lose. To wait is to win at the right moment. Finally, this premise connects us to the next. If humility is the secret of honor, then speaking before the proper time is a sign of arrogance that leads to shame. The next proverb will teach us that words spoken hastily can become heavy burdens. The wise know how to wait, not only for honor, but also for the right time to speak. Proverbs 25 warns us that speaking out of turn or bringing accusations too quickly is like stumbling on the road. Words spoken at the wrong time not only fail to build, but also bring shame to the one who utters them. Speech has its timing, and when that timing is ignored, even truth can turn into folly. Wisdom is not only about what to say, but when and how to say it. This truth is crucial in a world where everyone wants to be heard. The rush to speak, to defend oneself, or to accuse often leads to regret. How many conflicts could have been avoided if silence had prevailed? How many relationships could have been preserved if words had waited for the right moment? A wise person understands that time is part of the message. A premature word is like a fruit picked before ripening. It will be bitter. Practically speaking, this principle challenges us in moments of conflict. When we are offended, our instinct is to answer immediately. Yet Proverbs teaches us that haste is a trap. The wise breathe, reflect, and only then respond. Impulsiveness turns the tongue into a stumbling block, while patience transforms words into tools of healing. Speaking too soon is tripping over our own pride. This proverb also addresses the legal and relational dimension. Bringing accusations without full knowledge of the facts destroys lives and reputations. Acting based on appearances without deep investigation leads to injustice. The wise are not seduced by the urgency of opinion. They wait until the truth comes to light. The fool rushes to speak. The wise choose the right moment. Spiritually, this truth reveals the character of Christ, who remained silent before his accusers. His silence was not weakness, but strength under control. He knew the timing of every word and chose silence when words would not bring fruit. This is the wisdom we are called to imitate, to discern when to speak and when silence speaks louder. Applying this in daily life, we can see the value of discernment. At work, in family, or even on social media, the temptation to speak before thinking is constant. But whoever controls the tongue prevents countless conflicts. A word spoken out of time can destroy years of trust. The wise know that timing is as valuable as the message itself. Finally, this premise connects with the next. If speaking before the right time is stumbling, then speaking at the right time is pure gold. The next proverb will teach us that a word fitly spoken is like golden apples in settings of silver, rare, beautiful, and valuable. Timing transforms speech into treasure. The proverb declares, a word fitly spoken is like apples of gold in settings of silver. This image is one of the most poetic in the entire book of Proverbs, showing us that words, when spoken at the right time, carry incomparable beauty and value. Just as golden apples placed in a silver frame combine harmony and refinement, so a wise word, spoken in its proper moment, becomes a jewel that enriches hearts. This teaches us that wisdom is not only in the content of what we say, but in the timing and context. Even true words lose their power when spoken in haste or in the wrong spirit. On the other hand, a simple phrase, spoken at the right moment, can heal wounds, restore friendships, and ignite hope. Words are like seeds, and the soil of timing defines their fruitfulness. Practically, this principle applies to all areas of life. A word of encouragement to someone on the brink of giving up can change their destiny. A warning given in the right way can prevent a tragedy. A message of hope spoken in the valley of despair becomes life itself. The wise person knows that the tongue is not a weapon to be used randomly, but an instrument to be tuned for each occasion. This image also teaches us about intentionality. Just as golden apples and silver frames are not accidental but carefully crafted, so should our words be. The wise prepare themselves to speak, choosing expressions that edify rather than destroy. The fool, on the other hand, speaks without filter, scattering words as if they had no weight. Wisdom lies in treating each sentence as something that carries eternal value. Spiritually, we see this in the words of Christ. Every phrase he spoke was perfect because it was always in the right time and in the right measure. He comforted the broken-hearted, corrected the arrogant, and confronted the hypocrites. His words were like golden apples transforming lives. As his disciples, we are called to follow this pattern, to speak not only what is true, but also what builds. This principle also protects us from the opposite error, silence when words are necessary. Wisdom is not only knowing when to remain silent, but also when to speak. Silence in the face of injustice, for example, is complicity. The wise discern whether their silence will bring peace or harm, whether their words will heal or wound. It is in this balance that the jewel of golden words is found. Finally, this premise connects with the next. If a word at the right time is like gold, then a rebuke given wisely is like a precious jewel that molds character. Just as adornments beautify the body, so correction spoken in love beautifies the soul. The next proverb will teach us that sincere rebuke is one of the greatest treasures a person can receive. The proverb declares, "Like an earring of gold, or an ornament of fine gold, is the rebuke of a wise judge to a listening ear." This comparison is striking because it shows that correction, though often uncomfortable, is actually a treasure. Just as jewelry beautifies and adds value, a sincere rebuke, received with humility, beautifies the character and strengthens the soul. Correction is not humiliation, but adornment. This lesson challenges the culture of pride. Most people resist correction because they see it as an attack. Yet wisdom shows that a rebuke from a just person is one of the greatest gifts we can receive. To be corrected is to be reminded of our blind spots and guided to a higher path. Only the humble recognize that correction is proof of love and care. In practical terms, this means that we should value those who have the courage to tell us the truth, even when it hurts. Flattery may soothe the ego, but it does not build character. Correction may sting, but it transforms. Friends who rebuke us with sincerity are more valuable than crowds who applaud our mistakes. The wise person treasures constructive criticism as much as gold. Spiritually, rebuke is also a mark of divine love. The book of Hebrews reminds us that the Lord disciplines those he loves. Correction is proof of belonging. When God confronts us through his word, his spirit, or even through people, he's adorning us with jewels of maturity. To reject correction is to reject growth. To accept it is to walk in the path of wisdom. This proverb also teaches us the balance between correcting and listening. Rebuke only becomes adornment when the ear is willing to listen. The same word that beautifies one can harden another. That is why correction must be spoken with wisdom and received with humility. Both sides must be aligned for the treasure to be complete. In everyday life, we must learn both roles, to correct with love and to receive correction with maturity. Parents, teachers, leaders, and friends, all are called to offer rebukes not to destroy, but to build. Likewise, we must learn to silence pride and allow words of correction to polish us. Every rebuke wisely given and humbly received is a step toward greatness. Finally, this premise connects with the next. If a rebuke is like a jewel that beautifies, then false promises are like clouds that promise rain but deliver nothing. While correction builds, deception frustrates. The next proverb will show us that unreliable people create disappointment as heavy as drought in the midst of thirst. The proverb declares, Like clouds and wind without rain is one who boasts of gifts never given. This image reveals the frustration of relying on empty promises. Just as the farmer looks at the sky and expects rain from heavy clouds, so people look to words of promise, expecting fulfillment. Yet when the promise is not kept, the disappointment is bitter. False expectations weigh more heavily than silence. This teaches us that trust is not built on what we say, but on what we fulfill. Many speak of generosity, fidelity, or loyalty, but their actions betray their words. Just as dry land cracks under the false promise of rain, so hearts dry up when they are deceived. The wise do not boast of what they cannot deliver. They prefer to do quietly rather than speak loudly without acting. In practical life, this truth teaches us responsibility in every promise we make. A father who promises his child but does not fulfill destroys trust. A leader who boasts of results but delivers none loses credibility. A friend who says he will be present but fails weakens the bond. Words without fulfillment are like clouds without water. They create expectation but bring no life. Spiritually, this principle reveals the difference between man and God. Human beings often promise and fail, but the Lord never does. Every word he has spoken is fulfilled in his time. His promises are rain that always descends, refreshing the weary land. That is why we are called to imitate his character, being faithful in the little, so that we may be trusted with the greater. This proverb also serves as a warning against vanity. Many people boast of what they will give or do in order to impress others, but such boasting only exposes their emptiness. The wise do not live to impress, but to fulfill. True honor does not lie in talking much, but in delivering consistently. Empty words are like clouds without rain, noise without fruit. In daily life, we need to learn to measure our words. It is better to promise little and fulfill it faithfully than to boast much and disappoint. Trust is like a delicate fabric. Once torn, it is difficult to mend. That is why we must be careful with the expectations we create in others. When we speak, we sow hope. When we fulfill, we reap confidence. Finally, this premise prepares us for the next. If false promises frustrate like clouds without rain, patience, on the other hand, has the power to move even kings. The next proverb will show us that persistence and gentleness can open doors that force alone cannot. The proverb teaches, through patience, a ruler can be persuaded, and a gentle tongue can break a bone. This truth is extraordinary because it reveals that true power does not lie in violence or imposition, but in patience and gentleness. What seems fragile, soft words and steady waiting, can actually break resistance stronger than bone. Wisdom in speech is mightier than weapons. This shows us that patience is not passivity, but strategy. Many think that to wait is to do nothing, but in truth, patience is a deliberate choice to act at the right time. Just as water wears down rock by constancy, so patience can bend the hardest wills. This is a weapon invisible to the eyes, but powerful in its results. Impatience creates resistance. Patience disarms it. Practically, this principle applies in leadership, relationships, and conflicts. A boss who imposes fear may achieve obedience but not loyalty. A parent who shouts may gain silence but not respect. On the other hand, patience and gentleness open doors to genuine change. They do not coerce, they transform. Whoever rules through patience rules more firmly than those who dominate by force. Spiritually, this principle reflects the character of God. The Lord does not impose himself by tyranny, but by patience. He waits, corrects, and calls again and again until hearts are broken not by fear, but by love. His patience leads us to repentance. This is the pattern we are invited to follow, conquering through kindness, breaking barriers with gentleness. This proverb also teaches us that patience is a sign of inner strength. It is easy to explode in anger. It is difficult to wait calmly. Patience proves that the spirit is under control. Those who endure without losing composure are not weak, they are masters of themselves. The bone-breaking force here is not in pressure but in unshakable constancy. In daily life, we see this truth in negotiations, family conversations, and even in personal struggles. Persistence combined with gentleness often achieves what brute force cannot. A gentle word at the right moment has the power to soften even the hardest hearts. That is why the wise prefer patience to anger and gentleness to violence. Finally, this premise connects with the next. If patience is powerful enough to break bones and conquer kings, then excess is dangerous enough to bring destruction. The next proverb will remind us that even something as sweet as honey, if consumed in excess, becomes harmful. Balance is the true mark of wisdom. The proverb warns, if you find honey, eat just enough, too much of it, and you will vomit. This image is both simple and profound, teaching us that even what is sweet can become harmful when consumed without measure. Honey here symbolizes not only pleasures, but all the good things in life. What should be a blessing turns into poison when we cross the boundary of moderation. This lesson shows us that wisdom is not in rejecting what is good, but in knowing how to use it in the right measure. God created delights to be enjoyed but not idolized. Food, rest, relationships, success, everything loses its value when turned into excess. Honey, which is nourishment and sweetness, becomes disgust when consumed without restraint. The same is true for every area of life. Practically, this truth protects us from addictions. Many fall because they do not understand the power of excess. What begins as pleasure soon becomes slavery. Excess food harms health, excess ambition destroys relationships, excess leisure weakens discipline. The wise understand that balance is not limitation, it is protection. Boundaries keep blessings from turning into curses. Spiritually, this principle reminds us that only God can truly satisfy the human heart. Everything else, when consumed in excess, leaves emptiness. Honey is pleasant, but it cannot sustain life. Only the bread of heaven fills the soul, without excess or lack. To seek pleasure in created things without turning to the Creator is to condemn ourselves to dissatisfaction. Moderation redirects us to the source of true fulfillment. This proverb also confronts us with self-control. To stop before excess requires discipline and awareness. Many know what is harmful, but continue until they are sick. Wisdom calls us to learn to say enough at the right time. To live without restraint is to invite ruin. To live with moderation is to preserve joy. The one who governs himself enjoys what he has without becoming a slave to it. In everyday life, this principle becomes practical in small choices. Knowing when to stop eating, when to stop talking, when to stop working, these decisions determine our quality of life. Honey will always be sweet, but wisdom tells us that too much sweetness sickens. Moderation allows us to enjoy what is good without losing balance. Finally, this premise connects with the next. If even honey in excess becomes harmful, then excessive presence in another's house also causes weariness. The next proverb will teach us that boundaries are essential, not only with things, but also with people. Even friendship must respect limits to be preserved. The proverb warns, seldom set foot in your neighbor's house, too much of you, and they will hate you. This counsel is striking because it shows that even good relationships can be damaged by the lack of boundaries. Friendship is like a garden. It flourishes with care, but withers when suffocated. Too much presence instead of drawing hearts closer may end up pushing them away. This teaches us that balance is necessary, not only in what we consume, but also in how we relate. The constant presence, without sensitivity to timing and space, creates weariness. What should be a bond of joy can turn into a burden. Just as honey in excess makes one sick, company in excess tires. The wise know how to measure even closeness, respecting others' personal space. Practically, this principle teaches us about discretion. Visiting and being present are important, but insistence can become invasion. Relationships need breathing room to remain healthy. Friendship is strengthened not by suffocating presence, but by thoughtful presence. Knowing when to come and when to step back is a sign of maturity and love. This proverb also reminds us that true affection respects the other's time and needs. Entering someone's home too often without reason may reveal selfishness, placing one's desire for company above the other's rest. Love seeks balance. It rejoices in fellowship but understands silence. Wise friendship does not demand. It offers, it does not invade. It respects. Spiritually, this truth points to God's way of relating to us. The Lord is always present, but he never imposes himself. He invites, he knocks, he waits for the door to be opened. This is the model of true relationship, presence without invasion, closeness without suffocation. In the same way, our relationships must be marked by respect for boundaries. In daily life, we see how important this is in all kinds of relationships, family, friendship, or work. Even good company can become tiring when it disregards timing. A wise person knows that presence is more valuable when offered with moderation. It is absence that gives weight to presence. It is distance that increases appreciation. Finally, this premise connects with the next. If excess in friendship wears out bonds, false testimony destroys them altogether. The next proverb will teach us that a lying witness is as destructive as weapons of war. While lack of boundaries may weaken trust, lies completely shatter it. The proverb compares the false witness to a club, a sword, and a sharp arrow. These images are powerful because they reveal that lies are not merely moral failures, but weapons that wound, crush, and destroy. A false testimony is like a blow that leaves invisible scars, but real consequences. Words are never just sounds. They carry the power of life and death. This teaches us that lies, especially in matters of justice, have devastating effects. A false witness in court can condemn the innocent. A slanderous gossip can ruin a reputation built over years. A distorted accusation can divide families, end friendships, and destroy careers. A false testimony may seem fleeting, but its destruction is lasting. Practically, this truth calls us to integrity in all our words. Even when truth seems inconvenient, it is always the safest path. Lies may provide temporary advantage, but they eventually come to light. Time unmasks falsehood. Wisdom calls us to honor truth, not only in grand matters, but in the smallest details. Our word must be trustworthy, like gold refined by fire. This proverb also warns us about silence in the face of injustice. Sometimes it is not enough to simply avoid lying. Failing to speak when truth is needed also contributes to evil. Complicit silence becomes a form of false testimony. Wisdom teaches that we must not only avoid lies, but actively defend truth. To omit is often to betray. Spiritually, the false witness reflects the work of the enemy. The devil is called the father of lies and the accuser of the brethren. His strategy has always been to sow falsehood to destroy God's children. But Scripture assures us that no accusation will stand against those who are in Christ. Lies fall when confronted with the eternal truth of God. This principle also teaches us about trust. Once a lie is discovered, trust is shattered, and rebuilding it becomes extremely difficult. That is why false testimony is compared to weapons of war. It does not just hurt, it annihilates. Those who live by lies end up destroying their own credibility. A name, once stained, takes a lifetime to be restored. Finally, this premise connects with the next. If a false witness wounds like weapons, then placing trust in an unfaithful person brings equal pain. The next proverb will teach us that trusting an unreliable person is like chewing with a broken tooth or walking with a lame foot, painful and disappointing. The proverb teaches, like a bad tooth or a lame foot, is reliance on the unfaithful in a time of trouble. The image is painful because it shows the frustration of depending on someone who should provide support, but instead causes harm. A broken tooth cannot chew. A lame foot cannot walk. In the same way, trusting an unfaithful person leads only to pain and disappointment. This truth reveals that loyalty is the foundation of trust. Talent, charisma, or appearances mean nothing if faithfulness is absent. A person may appear useful in times of abundance, but in moments of crisis, their unreliability becomes evident. The disappointment is greater because expectation was higher. Trust once broken is as painful as a tooth that cracks under pressure. Practically, this principle teaches us to be careful with whom we place our confidence. It does not mean living suspiciously, but observing character over time. Trust should not be handed out blindly. It's built gradually through constancy and integrity. Placing weight on someone without structure is condemning ourselves to collapse. This proverb also challenges us to self-reflection. Are we ourselves trustworthy? Do our words match our actions? Do we fulfill what we promise? Many complain of betrayal, but forget that they may also have been the broken tooth in someone's life. Wisdom calls us not only to choose well whom to trust, but to become worthy of trust ourselves. Spiritually, faithfulness reflects the very character of God. He is faithful in all circumstances, even when we are unfaithful. He never abandons, never fails, never retracts his word. To be faithful is to reflect his image. That is why loyalty is not merely a social virtue, but a spiritual testimony. The faithful become safe harbors for those around them. This principle also teaches us that pain in trust is inevitable when it is misplaced. Few things hurt more than betrayal. That is why Proverbs uses such strong images. A tooth breaking when you try to eat, a foot twisting when you try to walk. Both bring frustration because what should help ends up failing. Trust broken becomes unforgettable pain. Finally, this premise connects with the next. If trusting an unfaithful person causes pain, then showing insensitivity toward another's suffering is even crueler. The next proverb will teach us that singing cheerful songs to a grieving heart is like pouring vinegar on wounds. It worsens pain instead of healing it. The proverb teaches, like one who takes away a garment on a cold day, or like vinegar poured on a wound, is one who sings songs to a heavy heart. This image is striking because it shows that insensitivity can be as cruel as violence. Instead of comforting the suffering, false joy only increases their pain. A heart in grief does not need songs, but presence and empathy. This truth highlights the power of empathy. Real comfort is not in denying another's pain, but in sharing it. Singing to someone in mourning is to minimize their suffering, as if saying, "Your pain doesn't matter." Wisdom calls us to do the opposite, to feel with those who feel, to weep with those who weep, to accompany with silence when words are not enough. Practically, this principle reminds us that compassion is more valuable than forced optimism. Many, with good intentions, try to encourage the suffering with phrases like "cheer up" or "be strong," but these words often sting like vinegar on an open wound. The wise understand that comfort is not always speaking, but listening. Sometimes the greatest act of love is simply being present. Spiritually, this reflects the heart of Christ. When he saw Mary and Martha weeping for Lazarus, he himself wept, even knowing he would raise him. He showed us that love does not skip over pain, but embraces it. God does not laugh at our wounds. He shares them with us. This is the model for us, to be companions in suffering, not deniers of it. This proverb also teaches us about timing. There is a time to rejoice and a time to mourn. To force joy in the midst of grief is to act foolishly. True wisdom is to discern the moment. To respect sorrow is to honor the heart. Whoever ignores this principle wounds the soul of those they should be comforting. In everyday life, this is seen in relationships, in friendships, and even in ministry. Those who carry empathy know that each situation requires a different posture. Comfort sometimes comes through a word, sometimes through silence, and often through an embrace. What wounds is trying to impose laughter when the soul cries. What heals is joining in the cry until laughter is reborn naturally. Finally, this premise connects with the next. If singing to the suffering is cruelty, then feeding an enemy is an act of greatness. The next proverb will teach us that giving bread and water to those who hate us is not weakness, but strength. For kindness disarms where revenge would only destroy. The proverb teaches, if your enemy is hungry, give him bread to eat. If he is thirsty, give him water to drink. For in so doing, you will heap burning coals on his head, and the Lord will reward you. This instruction seems counterintuitive, but it contains a profound truth. Vengeance perpetuates hatred, while kindness disarms it. Feeding an enemy is not weakness. It is victory over evil. This lesson reveals that the human instinct seeks retaliation, but divine wisdom teaches compassion. To give bread and water to an enemy is not to approve of their injustice, but to break the cycle of violence. A good act in response to evil exposes the aggressor's own conscience. This is the essence of heaping coals, not punishment through violence, but awakening shame through unexpected kindness. Practically, this principle challenges us in moments of conflict. Forgiving is already difficult, but helping the one who wronged us goes further. It is an act that requires maturity and inner strength. Anyone can retaliate, but only the truly wise can respond with generosity. To do so is not to lose dignity, but to demonstrate mastery over one's own spirit. Spiritually, this proverb points us to Christ. On the cross, he prayed for those who crucified him, "Father, forgive them, for they know not what they do." His act of love in the face of hatred revealed divine greatness. To feed an enemy is to reflect the heart of Jesus, who overcame evil not with swords, but with sacrificial love. This is the path of true discipleship. This teaching also brings freedom. Hatred imprisons. Kindness liberates. When we choose to treat enemies with generosity, we are no longer slaves to vengeance. The gesture may or may not transform the enemy, but it always transforms us. We cease to carry the burden of bitterness and begin to walk in peace. This is one of the greatest rewards from God. In everyday life, this can be practiced in small actions. Responding to offense with silence, answering rudeness with courtesy, offering help to those who hurt us. These choices break the predictable chain of retaliation. Evil expects more evil, but when it receives good, it is destabilized. This is the wisdom that changes atmospheres and rewrites stories. Finally, this premise connects with the next. If feeding an enemy is a demonstration of greatness, then gossip is the opposite, a demonstration of weakness that destroys friendships. The next proverb will show us that malicious words separate even close companions, proving that the tongue can be more destructive than weapons. The proverb warns that gossip has the power to separate even close friends. Words spoken in secret, carrying poison and distortion, can corrode relationships that took years to build. Gossip is like a cold wind that freezes trust and creates invisible walls between hearts. What seems strong can be broken in silence through whispers of betrayal. The tongue that slanders is a weapon as deadly as any sword. This truth reveals that friendship is built on trust, but gossip erodes that foundation. A distorted phrase, a half-truth, or a malicious exaggeration can outweigh years of loyalty. The wise protect relationships by silencing gossip instead of spreading it. The foolish, however, repeat what they hear and become instruments of division. A trusted friendship can be undone by a single uncontrolled tongue. Practically, this principle teaches us to guard not only what we say, but also what we listen to. Gossip needs two participants, one who speaks and one who listens. If we refuse to give it space, it dies. Just as fire dies without wood, gossip disappears without ears willing to hear it. Silence, in this case, becomes a shield of protection for relationships. Spiritually, gossip is one of the enemy's main tools to bring division. He knows that a divided people is a defeated people. That is why the scriptures constantly warn against the use of the tongue. To participate in gossip is to become an ally of the accuser. To silence it is to align ourselves with the Spirit of God, who brings unity. This proverb also teaches discernment about the company we keep. Those who gossip to us will eventually gossip about us. Loyalty is tested in silence, not in applause. A true friend protects what we confide. A false friend exposes it for amusement or gain. Recognizing the difference is crucial to safeguarding our hearts from unnecessary wounds. In daily life, this truth becomes practical in conflicts. Instead of talking behind someone's back, wisdom calls us to confront directly, with love and honesty. Dialogue builds bridges, gossip builds walls. Every time we are tempted to speak behind someone, we must ask, am I building or destroying? Words must be seeds of peace, not daggers of division. Finally, this premise connects with the next. If malicious tongues destroy friendships, the lack of self-control destroys lives. The next proverb will teach us that a person without discipline is like a city without walls, vulnerable to any attack. True wisdom is not only about silencing the tongue, but also about mastering the spirit. The proverb declares, like a city whose walls are broken through is a person who lacks self-control. This metaphor is striking because, in ancient times, walls were the guarantee of a city's safety. Without them, enemies could easily invade. In the same way, a person without discipline becomes vulnerable to any attack. Self-control is not just a virtue, it is protection against collapse. This truth reveals that the greatest victories are not over others, but over ourselves. Many want to conquer nations, build empires, or lead others, but fail to govern their own emotions. The absence of inner discipline makes talents useless, destroys relationships, and cancels out achievements. True wisdom lies in mastering impulses. Whoever controls their spirit is stronger than one who captures a city. Practically, this principle applies to every aspect of life. How many careers have been destroyed by a single moment of anger? How many families have suffered because someone did not control their tongue? How many futures have been wasted because of unrestrained desires? Without walls, even the richest city is looted. Without discipline, even the most gifted life collapses. Spiritually, self-control is a fruit of the Spirit. It is not about repressing emotions, but about governing them under God's direction. He does not call us to be slaves of impulses, but to walk in freedom. True liberty is not doing whatever we want, but being free from what enslaves us. Whoever is ruled by the Spirit builds unshakable walls of protection around their life. This proverb also reminds us that discipline is built over time. Just as a wall is raised stone by stone, self-control is developed through daily choices. Each time we restrain anger, we place a stone. Each time we resist temptation, we strengthen the structure. Over time, a fortress is built that protects us from external and internal attacks. In daily life, this truth challenges us to pay attention to the cracks in our walls. Negligence in small things eventually opens great breaches. A careless word, a moment of indulgence, a lack of vigilance, these are like holes through which enemies enter. Wisdom calls us to constant vigilance, repairing daily what threatens our protection. Finally, this premise connects with the next. If the absence of discipline leaves us exposed like a city without walls, then bad news has the power to weaken even the bones. The next proverb will teach us that words, whether good or bad, affect the vitality of the soul. What we feed on through news and messages shapes our strength or our weakness. The proverb teaches, like cold water to a weary soul is good news from a distant land. This vivid contrast shows us the enormous impact that words have on the human spirit. Just as refreshing water restores the body, good news revives the soul. Conversely, bad news weakens, drains energy, and dries up the bones. What we hear influences not only emotions, but also our physical and spiritual vitality. This truth highlights the close relationship between mind, heart, and body. Science today confirms what biblical wisdom proclaimed long ago. Constant exposure to negativity damages not only the soul, but also the body. Anxiety, fear, and despair often arise from an overload of bad news. On the other hand, words of hope bring strength, healing, and renewal. Practically, this principle teaches us to be cautious about the sources we allow to shape us. If we constantly drink from streams of pessimism, criticism, and despair, our souls will wither. Wisdom is not about denying reality, but about filtering what enters the heart. We must choose carefully which voices we will listen to, for they will shape our outlook and our strength. This proverb also challenges us to become messengers of good news. Just as bad news exhausts, good news builds. A word of encouragement, a testimony of victory, a reminder of hope. All of these can be like cold water to those who are weary. Every day, we have the choice to spread despair or to spread life. The wise choose to be a source of refreshment. Spiritually, the greatest good news is the gospel itself. The message of salvation through Christ is the living water that restores weary souls. In a world full of wars, crises, and tragedies, the gospel proclaims reconciliation, peace, and eternal life. This is why it is called the good news. It is the answer to every thirsty heart. In daily life, we must remember that bad news will always exist. But our perspective depends on what we focus on. The wise do not ignore difficulties, but choose to keep hope alive. Strength does not come from denying problems, but from believing in solutions greater than them. What we meditate on becomes the food of our soul, and that food defines our strength. Finally, this premise prepares us for the last lesson of the chapter. If bad news weakens and good news strengthens, then the greatest power lies in a broken spirit before God. The next proverb will reveal that a humble and surrendered heart is an invincible weapon, for it is guarded not by walls of stone, but by divine strength. The final teaching of this chapter reminds us that true strength is not found in external walls or visible defenses, but in inner surrender before God. Like a city without walls is a man without self-control. Yet the opposite is also true. One who bows his spirit before the Lord becomes unshakable. A broken spirit is not weakness. It is the greatest form of strength because it rests not on self but on God. This truth challenges human logic. The world glorifies arrogance, pride, and the appearance of power, but Scripture reveals that greatness lies in humility. The one who admits his limitations and bends before God receives strength that no enemy can overthrow. The broken are, paradoxically, the most victorious, for they fight not with their own weapons, but with heaven's. Practically, this principle teaches us about self-mastery. The broken spirit does not yield to anger, pride, or fear. It accepts correction, learns from failure, and perseveres despite difficulties. It is not a spirit of resignation, but of resilience. Breaking before God means being reshaped by His hands, turning fragility into fortitude. Spiritually, this truth connects with Christ's own teaching. Blessed are the meek, for they shall inherit the earth. The meek are not fragile. They are those who have their strength under control. Their humility disarms enemies, sustains them in trials, and keeps them firm in the face of persecution. The broken spirit is invincible because it depends not on itself, but on God's unfailing strength. This proverb also shows us the power of humility in relationships. Pride builds walls, but humility builds bridges. The arrogant destroy bonds, but the broken spirit preserves them. To yield in love is not to lose, but to win. The greatest victory is not to dominate others, but to conquer oneself. The broken spirit also brings inner freedom. Whoever surrenders to God is no longer ruled by offenses, fears, or vanity. Nothing external can dominate a heart that has already bowed to the Almighty. This is why humility is invincible. It has already surrendered. There is no enemy strong enough to defeat what has already been entrusted to God. Finally, this premise closes the chapter with a golden key. Throughout Proverbs 25, we learned about humility, patience, moderation, words, and self-control. Now everything converges on this, the broken spirit. This is the invincible weapon of the wise, the true fortress of the righteous, and the greatest inheritance we can possess. Whoever bows before God will never be destroyed by men. The journey through Proverbs 25 ends with a clear message. The greatest battles are not fought outside, but within. Self-control, patience, humility, and truth are the pillars that sustain a wise life. Whoever builds on these foundations becomes like a fortified city, unshakable before adversity. This chapter shows us that arrogance destroys, but humility raises up. That impatience closes doors, but gentleness opens them. That excess poisons, but moderation sustains. That lies destroy trust, but truth sets free. Every proverb is a compass pointing to the same direction, wisdom as the path to life. We also learn that relationships are preserved not by imposition, but by respect. Too much presence suffocates. Gossip divides. False testimony destroys. On the other hand, empathy, loyalty, and generosity heal and strengthen bonds. The highlight of this chapter is the call to be trustworthy and balanced people. To be like cold water to a weary soul, never like vinegar on a wound. To be the bearer of good news, not a messenger of destruction. To reflect in every action the character of God, spiritually. Proverbs 25 reminds us that our ultimate model is Christ himself, who conquered enemies through love, overcame hatred with forgiveness, and revealed strength through humility. His life is the living expression of everything this chapter teaches. The conclusion is simple but profound. The wise are not those who dominate others, but those who govern themselves. They are not those who display strength, but those who master their spirit. They are not those who build walls of arrogance, but those who establish humility as their fortress. Thus, Proverbs 25 leaves us with a timeless legacy. True greatness lies in humility, true strength in self-control, and true wisdom in living each day with balance and discernment under the fear of the Lord.